My teams look like they're ready to rock and roll. Oh, good. More friends, more friends. I love it. Coming here to the Community Connection Conference for me is a coming home. I served as the first Community Connections Conference coordinator back in 2012. And so after I can totally see the 10 years of sustained efforts across the city through these efforts. Our workshops have become more dynamic and certainly more inclusive. The audience looks like the city looks. And that was always our original intent. So again, I thank you for joining us this morning. Let's see here. All right. The workshop that you're in, of course, is Friends of the Falls. Friends of the Falls was founded in February 2016 by Paul Riles and Mark Wilson as a 501c3 public nonprofit. And their goal was they were seeking to transform the Upper Loch. I think everybody should be familiar with the Upper Loch at the falls into a gathering place. To restoring public access to the water. And with this effort, they realized that there was a story that was missing there at this site. And so today, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Carrie Day Aspinwall, and I am a partner with Friends of the Falls. And I am of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, urban Indian. I have never lived on the reservation. I've always been here in the Twin Cities. I've served our city in many capacities. I worked for the city of Minneapolis through the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department. So I've worked for the city 3 times and about 7 years apiece. Every time they needed help, they called me, and I was glad to serve. At the center of this effort to restore to the Central Riverfront, we cannot speak about the site, even the area, without first acknowledging who the original people were in this area. Territory. This is originally Dakota territory. What does that mean? How is that? How are we holding honor to these people that spent millenniums living and having such strong economies along this river? How can we say that we're going to restore without including their voice? Friends of the Falls recognized that missing story and reached out to the American Indian community here in Minneapolis, and specifically to the Native American Community Development Institute, and formed a partnership which, in agreement and in discussion, we are centering the Native voices. So all the efforts that go into helping understand the story of the site, the deep connections that are extended from the falls themselves, are critical to understanding who we are as Native people, who the original people, the Dakota people, who they are, and what this place meant. As part of centering our Native voices, it's in our culture and custom and practice to start things in a good way. And that good way always includes asking the Creator to bless us, to thank Him for all of the wonderful things that He provides for all of us, not just Indian people, but for everybody. He's provided us with that wonderful river. He's provided us with so many other things. And He's provided us the opportunity to sit down with one another, to understand, to share, to educate one another. And in that practice and custom is part of our culture. We are going to start this morning in a good way. I would ask that if you have glasses on, that you remove them, and I'll be coming around. I'm going to be lighting our sacred medicines. We call them the 4 chiefs: tobacco, sage, cedar, and sweetgrass. And again, this is an offering to the Creator, thanking Him, asking for guidance, asking to have a good meeting, to make sure that we're sharing and hearing and understanding each other's story and language. I'm very, very pleased to have members of the Native Partnership Council and members of our Indigenous community here within the room with us today. It helps me feel stronger because I hate being the only Indian up in the front of everybody. Sometimes that's how it works, but I'm happy today that my sisters are here with me, and they're going to help us get started in a good way, and then we'll go on with our conversation. I almost feel like there should be a drum. Oh, it feels, that's strength right there too, so. Your glasses. Ooh, strong with you today. You get specials. And I'm going to go this way, so I'll be back to you. Oh. You guys really give me strength. I can, yeah.
Sing a thank you song if you want me to.
Yes, please. Go ahead. Yeah. Love you. You're good. You're good. Hopefully we'll get around. Mm-hmm. We're running out. Okay. Thank you, my friend. We're almost done. Just perfect. I'll put this over here. Thank you all. So again, our Native Partnership Council member, Jewel Arkin, I'd really like to thank her for the song this morning. It just goes hand in hand when you're honoring and welcoming people into our culture and trying to provide education. Just the songs and our drums have such a wonderful way of just making you and bringing you in and helping you understand how deeply we feel about the relationships that we drive and that we're involved in. And so I thank you very much for being part of our circle today. I gave you a brief introduction to the project. And again, our theme is restoring a story disrupted. And we're creating a place of healing and celebration at the Owamni Omni St. Anthony Falls. I'm getting better at that. So that's Dakota language. I'm an old Ojibwe girl, so my tongue rolls a little bit differently. But my sisters are teaching me lots as we go through this process. Right now, I would like to introduce Mark Andrews, and he is our president of Friends of the Falls, and he will tell you more about the project, how we are centering Native voices, and how we are beginning our process with the city of Minneapolis. So Mark, if you would.
Thank you, Carrie, and good morning to everybody. My name is Mark Andrew. I'm the president of the Friends of the Falls, and it is a great big honor to be up here with all of you this morning talking about our vision, our dream, our partnership, our progress as we move together as a community and as a unified people. I grew up in Minneapolis. I'm a child of the city. I used to say to people in my elected career, I am not from Minneapolis, I am of Minneapolis. Because from there came a wellspring of life experiences that I've been able to translate into my life's mission. And when I grew up around Powderhorn Park in South Minneapolis, my vision of being down at the river and seeing the falls was one of wonderment and fascination. I loved being down by the river. I loved seeing, all the people. There weren't that many of them back then down there. And it was a great, diverse mix of people, including some of the most impoverished in our community. But the river itself was a wonderful, calming experience for me. And as I grew up and began to learn more about our community and learned that Minneapolis was born at the St. Anthony Falls, it was an amazing realization for me to know that this incredible history that was propelled by milling and by lumber and by commerce started right there. And so I went through most of my life thinking that the St. Anthony Falls is where it all happened, the story of the city is being told, and almost everybody here knows that. Think about the landmarks that are right there downtown on the Central Riverfront. The very first permanent crossing of the Mississippi River is on the exact alignment of the current Hennepin Avenue Bridge. That bridge was built, a lot of people think, oh gee, how could you have a bridge the first time crossing the Mississippi River way up in the hinterlands? Wouldn't that be down further south? And the answer to that is no. With the westward expansion came the need to build the bridge, and of course, that really created distinct identities for people who lived on each side of the river, and particularly the creation and development of the city of St. Paul and the city of Minneapolis. In my politician days, I used to call Minneapolis the St. Paul the biggest small city in America, and Minneapolis the smallest big city in America, because we were on our side of the river so much more urbane and so much more sophisticated, or so we thought. But a lot of those distinctions, again, came from what happened on each side of the Mississippi River. And it was way into my professional life that I learned that it wasn't just a bunch of white guys from Europe who came over here and started this culture. I learned that this culture has been here for thousands of years, and that indigenous people had a flourishing and a wonderful society. And at the site of the St. Anthony Falls, Owamni Omni, were many ceremonies, many sacred moments with childbirth and religious ceremonies and social activities, and we forgot all of that. In fact, we not only didn't forget it, we didn't know. I was appalled when now in the twilight of my professional career, I was appalled to learn that the teaching of Native American history was actually banned. The United States Army, the Catholic Church, the United States government all conspired to deny the existence and the histories of indigenous people here. And so the story was never told. And so when I came on board here, and our little white-dominated organization decided that we have not only a responsibility, we have a moral obligation. We have a moral obligation to tell the truth. And we decided together that this would start with that story being articulated by Native American people. And so we went to the city of Minneapolis and introduced our project. And you will probably learn today from Robert and Kirsty and others that it wasn't a very warm reception, honestly. And especially when we decided this ought to be a Native-centered partnership. And things didn't actually start to move until we had the good fortune of engaging with the Native American Community Development Institute, NACD, the largest urban Indian organization in this part of the country, led by Robert Lilligren. Is that not right?
That's not right, but.
Okay, so you can clap, but Robert tells me there's something bigger. So, and hopefully we'll learn that too. Yeah. Well, you know, we're all learning. We're all learning. And a big part of this project is aimed at making sure people learn and that people know, not just in their heads, but in their hearts. And so we started this mission. Kirsty Duvall has been the longest serving person in this organization, was in fact the only staff member for several years. And job number one was to not only form a trusting relationship with the Indigenous and Native American community, but also to get the various levels of government decision makers to buy in. And it was a tough sell. The city didn't want to go there because they didn't want to spend the money. They anticipated creating a vision that would translate to reality would take money. And with time and many meetings, the mayor and the city council became very strong supporters. The mayor made a statement today that was absolutely powerful about his belief that the city of Minneapolis has an obligation to move forward and build this partnership in trust and in friendship. And so the organization started out as an organization that sought to do a civic good, commercial development at the river, and become a visitor center for out-of-town travelers and people who live in the area. But it has evolved into something much deeper and much more important. And before I stop talking and turn this over to Robert, I want to say that the time is right for doing a project like this. To me, it feels like serendipity. I don't know if it does to you, Robert, but it feels like the stars aligned. There are many cliche ways to describe it. But the idea is that we are a community in strife. We are a community divided largely around economic and racial barriers. And this organization attempts to take a significant step into the future and bond with our communities of color in ways that allow us to tell the real story of what happened there. Not part of the story, but the whole story of what happened there, and that's a big part of what this project is about. So I'm very happy to be here with you today. I hope people ask questions, and I hope people resonate to what it is we are feeling and experiencing in trying to make a project of this size, scale, and significance evolve. And with that, I'd like to ask Robert Lilligren, the head of NACD, to come forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thanks, Mark. Bonjour, Ninde Meganaduk. Hello, my relatives. I'm Robert Lilligren. I'm a citizen of the White Earth Ojibwe Nation, and I'm a third-generation Minneapolis urban Indian. In fact, my grandmother lived out her life about 3 blocks to the west here in the Loring Park neighborhood. That's where my dad grew up as well, between there and the reservation. I now live in Loring Heights neighborhood, so not far from here at all, but I spent 36 years of my life, a big chunk of my younger days, as a Phillips resident and living in what's now Phillips West neighborhood. Yeah, Phillips. And I like to feel like I retain some of that Phillips style, even now that I don't live there anymore. And I am really honored to stand here, and I thank you all for listening to us today. And as Carrie mentioned, we thought the format was going to be a little more conversational, not really appropriate for a lot of technology. And so I really urge you to go to the website, Friends of the Falls, look at the Falls Initiative, because one of the things that we really emphasize is, yep, thank you, Mona. You can see that on the back of the handout, is storytelling. And Friends of the Falls has really been investing in storytelling, and so there are just incredible pieces of media that can educate you more about the project. But my history with the project started when Mark gave me a call. We knew each other from elected life. Our careers had been kind of parallel, intersected at certain points, but we'd never worked quite this closely together before. And Mark and I met, and he asked first if one favor. He said, will you be the Native person I can come and ask the stupid questions to? And I was really happy he asked me that, and I agreed. And it's about education, right? And when someone asks you a question in a good and respectful way, they deserve an answer. And so that launched this relationship, and then it built. And Mark was very interested, Friends of the Falls was very interested in engaging Native voices in an authentic way. And the Native folks in the room know, we hear that all the time. We hear that a lot. We're trying to engage Native people. Then sort of the next conversation is, well, we invited Native people, they came once, but they never came back. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And a big one is a lot of these spaces, a lot of these conversations are not meant for Native people. And they are often sort of being held, convened by either public sector institutions or private sector institutions, nonprofits, that were part of colonization, part of forced assimilation, part of cultural and physical genocide. And so they're already unwelcoming spaces. And so knowing this and working for Native American Community Development Institute, NACD, who often occupies this risky space between community and non-Native white institutions, Mark and I talked for a long time, for about 6 months before NACD committed to this project. And I really had to understand, I really had to believe that Friends of the Falls, that their governance, their board, the interests they represent, truly were committed to centering Native voices and putting Native voices in the lead. And that took some time and some convincing. We talked about this place in the city, the central riverfront. Mark highlighted some of the activities there that were really promoted colonization, industrialization, really desecrated this very, very sacred place. And in some ways, at the time, Friends of the Falls as an organization really represented the descendants of those interests, the interests of industrialization and colonization. So this, to me, seemed like a very, very fertile place to try to do this better, to try to do this in a better way, in a different way. And I was part of government for 12 years. I served on the Minneapolis City Council. And I kind of got there through my Phillips-style activism, but at a lot of these kinds of conversations where there was multiple layers of government, multiple layers of commercial interests, community interests, all competing for space. And I kind of cut my teeth in public life, participating in these kinds of place-based design projects, conversations. They often related to government infrastructure. I was almost always shaking my tiny fist pissed at the government saying, we're here, people are here, you know, you're stomping all over us, and not often getting heard. And so when I saw this opportunity to work with Friends of the Falls and all of these partners that you see represented in this diagram, to really figure out a better way to do it, a different way to do it, and a way that could inform the whole system from the community through the city government, county, state, federal plays a huge role here. I thought this was worth a shot to try it. And really, right away we set with a strategy of engaging the descendants of the people who were here first, the Dakota people. And easiest way, and it wasn't really easy, but the strategy we set on was to engage the tribal governments of the 4 Dakota tribes first, as sort of the authentic representation of the descendants of the original people here. And then we started to assemble what we call our Native Partnership Council, and you'll hear more about that in a bit. And I'm just so honored to have Mona and Jewel here from the Native Partnership Council, revered Dakota elders, cultural carriers. And we started with a conversation, and I had learned from my elders, Native people have to speak first in these situations. And if the Native people don't speak first, if it's the white guys in suits up in front of the room, you're never going to get authentic Native voices. That's why people don't come back after they come to one meeting. And Friends of the Falls committed to that. We brought the council together in circle and told stories, some beautiful and some heart-wrenching stories of the Native Partnership Council's personal experiences of this space. And we started by establishing some values and principles, indigenous ones, that the river has a spirit and is alive, water has rights, land has rights, things like that, that are still at the center of everything that we're doing. And during my time on city council, the 35W bridge collapsed. You might remember that tragedy, and that was education for me in the complexities of the government jurisdictions at this spot. Really, it couldn't be more complicated. Well, I guess it could be if you added native sovereignty on it, another layer of complexity, but this is complex units of government that are all interacting there. And at the end of the day, it's hard as a community person to really feel like they have your best interest at heart, or that you're even being heard through a process like this. And so we're determined to keep Native voices centered, determined to keep Native voices in the lead here, which is, it's just complicated. You know, this is a place where there isn't a sovereign Native nation that represents this area, but there's historical sovereignty, moral sovereignty, spiritual sovereignty to the space. And so how do we really, really put that in the lead, and then have the city government, the county, metropolitan, state government, and federal government fall in? No easy task, and we've had some successes, and that we have a memo of understanding. I think maybe Chirsti might talk a bit about this, with the city of Minneapolis, a MOU that was negotiated that gives us the ability to do this on the city's behalf. Groundbreaking kind of document, I think. And so we'll see. The proof will be in the pudding, right? We'll see what this place looks like in 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, and that'll show how successful we are. But I truly believe that if we do that, continue to do this well, continue to do this right, in partnerships, in the trust, that we have the opportunity not just to do something really significant right there in the central riverfront and at the lock and dam, but to really change the system and how Native voices can be respected and heard in these complicated, fully built environments. So I think it's really thrilling. So Miigwech, thanks for listening to me. And do I introduce you? Cheers. Carrie, come on down.
Okay. Mindy, you gotta give me a minute. You know, because of COVID, I sat at my desk for 2 years, you know, and in that time I aged, you know, and, you know, there was a time when I thought, oh my goodness, you know, my mother always told me, don't you ever let your hair go. Don't ever let your fingernails go. You got to keep yourself up, you know, and boy, in that 2 years, all of a sudden the gray started coming, and I thought, hey, that's not so bad. that means that there's something here, that, oh, what? There's something to be said about time and how it passes and what we learn and what we share across those sometimes many years. And not that, time travels so fast. It just goes by so quickly. My husband also worked on the Mississippi River, pumping our city's water. He was a water engineer, so every drink that you took, every time you opened that tap, that was my husband. He's still around. He is retired. I made him retire. I was going to retire with him, but then I couldn't stop. So he's at home, on this stretch of events that we've had over the last couple of days. Watch me come home and celebrate the great deal of voice that we have been giving our people. I have worked for that all my life. I was born and raised in the Phillips neighborhood, Franklin Avenue, Bloomington Avenue, Cedar Avenue, Lake Street. I used to tell my kids, I know everything from Franklin Avenue to the other side of Potterhorn Park, from Park Avenue over to Cedar Avenue. I knew every garage, every alley, every nook and cranny of that place, because that was where I played and grew up. And I have been so blessed to be able to live my life in friendship with a couple of members here today. And we talked about the Native Partnership Council. I was asked to identify and make an ask of our Dakota relatives to sit with us, to help guide us, to share knowledge, to share stories, to bring their input, to give us their opinions, good, bad, or ugly on any of this, to bring their truth, to help us with reconciliation. And I just want to acknowledge today two of those ladies. Jewel Arkren, you heard from her already through her beautiful song. Jewel, if you girls want to come up here and say a couple things, I can bring the microphone to you too, I think. Eh? Okay, all right. And the gal sitting next to her is Mona Smith. Yeah. And again, these are only two of the ladies. And when I was, courting these relationships, I was trying to be so thoughtful and, not being Dakota, what kinds of things are important, and I just, was trying so hard to understand and educate myself. I literally took about a month to just do a full-on Dakota 101, and then I went to my medicines and I said, you know what? Everything that I need to know is right here. And so that's where I started with who in my life has made significant impacts. And so I started making the asks. And the first round, 7 ladies. It was an all-woman council. And I thought, oh my gosh, gender balance. But, and again, in a traditional sense, that's the way it always has been, is the women, we don't lead from the forward, we lead from behind. And there's something to be said sometimes about, behind every good man, there's a better woman, and again, I really feel like the women in our tribes, in our bands, and here locally and across the state and nationally now, I've been able to visit. We have some very strong women in our tribes and in our culture, and they have really maintained and kept our culture alive, our language, helped us rear our children. Again, our elders are so very important. And when we talk about the Native Partnership Council, we don't go in there and go, okay, we're having a meeting, here's Agenda 1, here's Agenda 2, here's, all this. No, it don't go like that. We sit in a circle, and if you visit some of those QR codes that we have or go to the website, you'll see we start in circle. And that's, again, it's just our natural way of doing what needs to be done. And it isn't so much about agendas, but stories. The stories that come out are not stories. Some of them are pretty entertaining, but others there's messages within, and there's messages that are meant to guide us. There's messages in there of hurt and pain, sorrow, and messages of hope. And with this Native Partnership Council, we've celebrated that there was this opportunity for us to really create space, create healing, share education and knowledge. And our council stepped up to the circle and said, yes, we will. And I've been so blessed, and I think this project has been completely blessed by the presence of our women, of our young people. We have 2 young gentlemen that also serve on our council. And again, these young adults know their language. Oh, I don't even know my whole language. And these young people, our people here, our representatives, they know the language, and it's so beautiful. I love language, and I'm so jealous that they can say things so easily and just speak. And so, again, we've centered our work on the voices of our Native people, and guided by our medicines and the things that we know are right and what should be reckoned with, and what the truth really is in these spaces. It's not always easy. That's pain. It's a lot of pain. You know, there's ancestral, what is that called? Generational trauma. I think that's what you called it, Mona, that one time. Generational trauma. It keeps going from when it started, and it's passed on through our children, through the mothers. And again, it just keeps going, and we're here to try and help break some of that trauma, to tell the story as we know it to be, and to support our Dakota relatives in their homecoming. We had our first gathering of the Native Partnership Council was intended to be kind of like a celebration, or, you know, we were gathering all these people, all the electeds and all these folks, and it was like, no, that's not how we start. This is not a celebration. As a matter of fact, it's very painful for our people to come down to that site and look at the desecration of the Spirit Island, to look at the change of the flow of the falls. And interestingly enough, she's going to do what she wants to do, whether we build walls or put up barriers or put rocks over here or do all this stuff. It's been tried many times over to hold her back. Yesterday we were down there. The power of the falls was magnificent. The mist that was flying off the falls, and it was almost like the creatures that were around our tour and around our people down there were happy. They're like, it's going to change. This is going to change. And all of the dynamics, all of the photographs that you see about the falls changed yesterday. She was so mighty. She was going in spaces and places where she was trying to be held back. Some of the barriers couldn't hold it back. A couple of us recognized where all the stagnant water was and all of the not so good stuff because of the lack of flow begin to come alive. We could see the bubbles coming up, so we knew that the water was coming from somewhere, and it was trying to get to the top in order to flow where she wanted to go. So there's change that's happening, and I really appreciate the Native Partnership Council in their guidance and wisdom in all of this. This is a different project, and we're not even calling it a project. This is a journey. This is a journey about our Dakota relatives coming home. This is their territory. This is their original space. And the initial ceremony was called a key ceremony, which is welcoming the relatives home. And so that's how we started. And in that ceremony, we asked our spiritual people to help us open up the portals and let the river know that, we're here to help, that we're here to realize that she is in control, not us. And so we had a couple significant occurrences during this ceremony, and you always should be listening. I was standing next to my friend Kirsty during this ceremony, and she looked up, and I looked up after her, and there was a flock of doves that went into this big circle, and she said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And if you notice in some of the Native Partnership Council logo is that swoosh of doves. And after that, here comes the eagle. There's an eagle that lives down there. There's a great big nest right across the river from the lock and dam a little bit ways down. He's been there for years and years and years. I don't even know how long. But he came to acknowledge that we were opening up those portals, and he was there to help let us know that what we're doing is the right thing, and that the people that are sitting at the table with us are the right people. And so again, the role of our council is to provide guidance and leadership, wisdom, and to help teach folks like me who don't know the language, their history, and their culture. And so again, I want to acknowledge and honor my sisters sitting at the table there for everything that they've done with us. And so again, and their guidance and wisdom has been documented. We used to call them witnesses. As Indian people, there would be somebody that was designated to witness the gatherings. We didn't call them meetings, they were gatherings. And we found an individual who truly listens, not just with his ears, but with his heart and his spirit. And if you get a chance to go and look at our exhibit out in the exhibit hall out there, you'll see some of the creations that he's made for us. And I want to introduce you to this special young man. His name is David Malda. He's with a partnership company, GGN. And I'll tell you, he has really created, I even hate to say anything around him because he'll end up in a picture, because he listens that well. But they are he's listening, and it's not boxes and squares and all of this. He truly, truly can emulate our discussions in a way. He's making our vision, he's bringing our vision to life. And it's so amazing to be able to see this integration of land, water, sky, people in these diagrams and pics that he creates. And so with that, I'd like to introduce you to my good friend David Malda and thank him for joining us. He's here from Seattle. And so David, yeah.
Yeah, good. Thanks, everyone. And I have to say it's been a real honor to be a part of this process in such meaningful, rich community is really how I would think about it. There's a lot we could talk about with regard to thinking about the design, learning about this place. I'm not going to try to explain all of that. There's some great links to find some more information on those pages and handouts. The thing I really want to emphasize about this process, we often think about, in our design practice, landscape as being a practice that's connecting people to and through land, to each other through land, and connecting people to land. And coming into this process, I've learned so much from the Native Partnership Council, so many teachings around just how powerful and important the land is in relationships to the land are. And really, if there's anything that this project is about, in my mind, in thinking about its future, it's relationships. It's restoring relationships that have been lost, that have been forgotten, or in the case of the Dakota, intentionally severed. And that truth, that fundamental truth of the land and our ability to connect to it and through it is incredibly important when we think about so many of the challenges of our time. From climate to social unrest, we need to find those connections. We need to build those connections. And this is a project. It's not really just a project, it's a bigger process. And if we can continue this process of creating connections, building connections, restoring connections through the land, I think there's great opportunity for this to continue to deepen and grow, because there's no way that this small spot in the river could ever hold all the truth, could ever make all that change. But if we can engage through it and we can continue to have these conversations and continue to learn and listen, I think there's great power for much, much bigger needed change. And that's why this is so exciting to me, certainly. And again, I'm so privileged and honored to be a part of this. And I would ask that, there's a lot of links to spend some time looking through more of that material and continuing to explore that with us. Thanks.
Do you want me to introduce her?
Sure.
Okay, all right.
Well, Carrie, how much time do we have left?
I think probably about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So I'd like to introduce another significant partner to this project. Mark talked a little bit about her during his time up here. Kirsty Duval of Duval Companies is our main. She's our main gal. She is our. I really have to say her steerage through the political processes and bureaucracies and her knowledge of all of those system stuff has been so amazing. I've learned so much from her. And she literally keeps the balance for us with this, because again, in as much as this is Native-centered, we also have to understand that there are other jurisdictions that we're trying to navigate. And she's been such a good. I call her, the person that sits at the back of the canoe, kind of wading us through all of these sometimes turbulent water, as they call the falls. But Kirsty does it with strength and fortitude and a good heart, because she believes herself that this is about sharing that wisdom and truth about this site, and she's put everything that she has into an effort into all of that, and I so appreciate her, and she is another that I can call my sister. Kirsty?
Thank you, Carrie. Thanks, and want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to be really brief, but I think this conference is about how we work with government, and so I think one of the biggest challenges of a process like this is the fact that we're operating within multiple jurisdictions.
It's in the shot.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Multiple jurisdictions, kind of bureaucratic policies and procedures, and how do you do something like this where that's really not the point, How do you lead with Native voices? How do you protect a process like that and achieve something like that when you're talking about land that's publicly owned and is guided by really strong policies and regulations? And so Mark talked a little bit about, a lot of the commerce that happened here, the milling, the hydropower generation, that context of viewing land through the lens of economy is rooted in all of our planning structures. It's rooted in all of our policies. It's how government talks about land, disposes of land, even the word disposing of underutilized land. That is a completely foreign concept when you're talking about land in a different way, in the way that this project is talking about land. And so, you have to move into this concept of partnership. And so, public land, it just moves in a certain way. And it was crucial to this process to form a partnership with government. The city will be the initial, at least temporary owner of this land as it's conveyed from federal to local. And the city has opened the door to what's going to happen next. But the fact that Friends of the Falls was able to strike a partnership with the City of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Park Board, it just opened the door to a different kind of process. And that requires Friends of the Falls to take more risk. It requires Friends of the Falls to be a cost-sharing partner. And it requires Friends of the Falls to comply with the standard expectations of a broad and inclusive public process. We were willing to do all of those things. And so I think we were able to protect that central core Native Partnership Council as the leading voices in the process, and we were able to move forward in partnership. And so I won't say more about it. I think we're about out of time, but there's a lot more. There's a lot more to that story, and I think it can come up in questions if we have a little time. So thank you.
So, Robert and I are going to have to depart, but you're going to see us in that room over there. We have a special friend that we're going to be honoring today, and so we've been asked to help with some of the ceremonial stuff, but we'll leave you in good hands with Mark and David and our Partnership Council. Cheersey will help facilitate those questions and discussion. But I wanted to say thank you for joining us today, for being so patient, and for hearing and listening to our story. So thank you very much.
And I'll want to add, Alex Buffalohead from NACD staff is an integral part of this team is here as well. So if there's internal NACD questions, she can.
Do we have a moving mic or okay? So I might try to repeat your question just so that we capture it in the recording. Can we use one of these as a moving mic? Yeah. Okay.
Let's turn it on.
Oh, good.
Okay.
And this is Amanda. She also is with Friends of the Falls, and she's an incredible resource. She makes the magic happen. So, questions. Don't be shy. I know somebody's thinking of a question.
Or comments.
Yes.
Maybe I'm getting way ahead of the project here, but the capital campaign, where do you envision your funding coming from for this journey?
Yeah, so and maybe I can refer to that.
Can you still repeat it, Kirsty, into yours?
Yes, I sure will. I'm just going to grab this. She's asking about the capital campaign and where the funds will be coming from for this process. So, and if you can review this chart at the bottom of this page, it's conceptual milestones, and you'll see the lines on the top are really referring to partnerships, which are crucial to our success. And then at the bottom, the sort of gradient, that's about funding. And you'll see that at the beginning of this process, Friends of the Falls made a significant startup contribution. So Friends of the Falls was seeded with $5 million to support initial really legislative pursuits, because the first step in this process was, and you haven't even heard about this, was protecting the site from being further industrialized. There was a hydropower interest who was trying to amend a license and continue that to keep the Central Riverfront as an industrial property. And that was our first battle, was to prevent that from happening. So the organization was seeded at that time and really took a lot of those steps to get legislative protections and move the process forward. And actually, Friends of the Falls has continued to make those contributions through philanthropic support from our founders and others. We additionally, then you see that public contribution came in right around the time of the first MOU. That is state funding. So we actually pursued state funding through the Legislative Citizen Commission on Natural Resources. And we received that funding. So we have $2.8 million from the state, which is going to fund some of the early enhancements and also some of this actually engagement and design process. We move into the capital campaign, and that will be kicked off when we have something to raise funds to do. When will this parking lot become something new and different? And that capital campaign will be accompanied with a story, with a vision that is being crafted now. And I think the best ones to answer that question are Mona and Jewel. A lot of those principles, values, ideas are happening right now. And so what is it? Stay tuned, but it's going to be great. So, yeah.
I don't know if this is working, because. Oh, it goes to recording. Oh, I get recorded. Well, habajaki api chante washte na pechi uzapi. Yushki amachi copy he. Hello, my relatives. I greet you all with a handshake from my heart. I too, like Mark and Carrie and Robert, was born here in Minneapolis, and all of Southside was pretty much, we know them like the back of our hands. But my connection here is I'm Dakota, and I am Lakota, and I'm fortunate. I'm probably one of the folks who are, as a Dakota person, that knows our connection to this place, and I was taught from a very young age our connection to this place and to the land, and our responsibilities as to be a good relative and to care for it. And so I wanted to say Pidamaya to the group here, NACD, and to the Friends of the Falls, and David and Tristy and Carrie. I went to school with Carrie, so that's how we know it. We went to Phillips Junior High, and then so we definitely were part of the neighborhood, and. But wanted to say Pidamaya because I think like Mona and I, we've been through years and years, and Alex probably knows from your parents' and grandparents' experience of having told our story many, many, many times, and it fell on ears that just, that block that happens sometimes. I call it parallel trauma. If we have intergenerational historical trauma and we're victims, there's perpetrators. That's why I call it a parallel trauma that exists in the other population. But again, that having that connection to this place and having to really see an indigenous-led voice and really acknowledging the Dakota voice here is something we really want to say. Pidamaya, Wopida, Nina Washte, and so, Pidamaya.
Thank you, Jewel. Just to underline that, my mother was a community theater actor, and so teaching me to project was a big deal. So I don't need a microphone. That's another way of saying we're loud. I too want to add my Pidamaya to everyone involved in this project. I've been involved in several projects on the riverfront. And the first one was about 15, I don't know from time. Everything is either 30 years ago or 2 weeks ago in my mind. But many years ago, I was involved with an interpretive plan for the zone around the falls. And the first report was called The Power of the Falls. That alone told me somebody was listening. Because they would ask me stuff, it was a bunch of white people involved in various parts of the government organizations around the area. And I remember at first they said, what is your vision for 15, 20 years from now? And I said, I want to see an elders gathering here. And by damn, when I got the report and started, it said Dakota, Dakota, another page. There was something about Dakota. That was unheard of in my experience in my entire adult life of being the Indian in the room. People would hear the stories, they'd hear some facts about the history, and they'd be very sad. And then they'd go on. So at some point in my career here, occasionally being a consultant, I realized I did not want to be part of anything where Dakota people or any indigenous people were an and. You know, you got the list. And we got home. No, sorry, I'm on. This one, starting a ceremony, listening all along, seeing designs as they're developing, hearing people today talk about the experience of being involved, makes it all worth it. We got a ways to go to see what actually happens with this space. Native people are used to feeling pretty good in the process and then seeing it all disappear. Well, we're the Dakota people. We can't be loud. And if this doesn't come up, doesn't manifest in ways that have been talked about, have been drawn, we'll be really loud. And thank you all for coming to hear about it.
Professor Humanity is supportive of the concept of reconciliation, reparations, land back. When I look at the photo of the falls and the surrounding real estate as it is presently, it's unclear what designs or the extent of redesign, and I should say, property holding, how much is in the offering here. I mean, I'm ready to give it all up. I wonder if the dam is taken away. Does the original falls still exist? I wonder about that. I'm seeing the Stone Arch Bridge, which is, you know, I'm a laborer. I worked at Smith Foundry in Phillips neighborhood for 35 years. That's why I have arthritis. But, you know, I admire much of that work. But as a white worker, I'm ready to give much of that back to the Dakota people for the sake of unity and reparations, reconciliation. But again, I'm seeing all these buildings. Are they in the mix of property, and are there commercial plans in existence at this point in time?
So,
If I can talk about that for a minute, it very often happens when people talk about indigenous people wherever, getting anything, being involved in anything, they're going to act like the people who took things and built things. And that's not really the way we operate. This is more about, this is for everyone. We're not going to take any buildings. If anybody would like to give them back, give the land back, that would be great. That's not what's going to happen here. What's going to happen here is, I like the way David said it best, continuing learning, continuing building relationships with the place, with each other. And we don't have to have those buildings to make that happen.
and
It would be if you get them.
That's not the plan.
And the land in question is currently federally owned. You can actually see the parcels if you go to the Hennepin County Property Information Map. You can see what land is owned by the U.S. government on the Central Riverfront. There's actually quite a bit because it's the upper lock, and then there's a big stretch of shoreline, and then there's the lower lock. So a very, very significant piece of that shoreline is in U.S. government hands. We are only talking about the upper lock at this point, but I can't imagine that this conversation might not continue to consider that very long stretch of shoreline, which is below the Guthrie. So that is currently still owned by the federal government. They're going to be kicking off a disposition study for the lower lock and lock 1, which is at the Ford Dam site. coming up here. They may have already announced that. But the upper lock was cleaved off and expedited because of the action, because of this community's action and focus on the upper lock. Back in 2018, there was congressional legislation, cleaving it off. Because those other two, are probably more controversial. They're more encumbered by hydropower interests and that sort of thing. And this one was closed. It was closed by Congress. So, but you can see the actual parcel boundary if you go. It does not include the buildings or the Mill Ruins Park. Those are park board owned. It's just the land on the other side.
Answer to my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, I think we're about, last question.
I'm not sure. Thank you for everything, first of all. I am so impressed by the language that's being used here and the process you've gone through. So I speak as a mother, as a person who's engaged myself in this community because I'm not originally from here, and raising my children in this community. Starting at the Walker Sculpture Garden, and how do we engage community, reaching out to hundreds of thousands of people that we have in Twin Cities and not showing up in spaces like this with so few people? That is the really important question for me. And I got engaged in this group only because I got engaged with Minneapolis St. Paul Film Society 4 years ago. On the other side, which is they too are all about storytelling, and especially with their International Film Festival, bringing stories from all the different cultures that really don't have a voice, who cannot represent themselves. So there too, I engage with them because there too we don't have people showing up. I walk around in the last 4 years, I've walked to all the places that I know, which I engage with my children. 5% of people know about Minneapolis St. Paul Film Society, who is one of the most legendary international film festival in the US. So why is it that we can't engage? And this is so important to me. I think somebody used synergy. This is the times. These are the times where we have to be imaginative. And I think about Jason Reynolds, an extraordinary writer who is pushing all of us to be imaginative and not stay with the old ways of, even with Minneapolis St. Paul Film Society. I watch all these few old people showing up. Love these old people. I love that generation. But we need to engage with our young children. We need to bring them with their families, with their parents. And so if we do not do that, all this energy goes to nothing. So here I am wanting to engage and volunteer and tap into and learn more than anything. But also I want to figure out people I can engage with so we can do the work in engaging all these different communities. Schools, all these schools need to know about what is happening. And so that is to all the efforts that you've put in. I think we need to have a lot of I won't use soldiers, foot parents that want to help you bring more people, more finances, support more children whose thoughts we engage early on. So thank you for all that you've done.
Mona and Jewel, did you want to speak to that? Oh, I'm just so excited to hear that comment because I thought everybody would be jumping on that because it's so central to what we're doing, storytelling, and even from when Carrie and I were working to really advocate for this to be richly documented with media. So if you go to our website, you'll see Mona talking about her experience, about generational trauma. you'll see these very short form videos that share some of these core experiences, and I just can't express how powerful that has been to be able to include those stories as a part of what we're offering as part of this process. And I think it really does help people, especially people who aren't super tuned into this, to get it and to understand, well, why is this important? Why is a process that looks like this important? It's been really, really so valuable. And so I think, and also the commitment to graphic recording. So we're not taking meeting minutes. There is, and not graphic recording just by anybody. I mean, it was really important to us to have an Indigenous artist who is going to be listening to these conversations and deeply understanding what's being shared by the Native Partnership Council. And those drawings are amazing. And you look at that series of drawings and you intuitively understand what are the big ideas, what's guiding the process, what are the goals. And so, and David, I'll just say David has carried that tradition right along. The visuals, the drawings, the way David is presenting his work, it's stories. And so I think I couldn't agree more. And if you have ideas about that, I think we'd be very open to it. Are we?
Make an announcement.
Oh yeah. Okay. So, sorry if we're really at our time. I'm going to invite Amanda Wiggin up to make an announcement on behalf of the team. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to encourage everyone. You've heard a lot about the visuals of both the site and the process, as well as the mayor's statement and his commitment to centering Native voices. And we have all of those things on display at our exhibit booth, which is number 127. If you walk into the exhibit hall, the first row, we're the last unit on your right. And we would love for you to see some more of those. You can also see them with the QR codes on your paper there, and to really hear more from you, either your reactions to this session or your ideas for the place. So thank you very much.